Absolutely. So one of the things I think was mentioned also is where the technology is evolving and where we are right now with the capabilities of the processing speeds and the sensors that are available, and just the whole, like you said, the intersection. I think that it's a perfect storm in time as well, post COVID and everything else. Whereas our current conversation with the guide dog community, whether it be users or trainers of guide dogs, would not have been even possible as a conversation. Would have been, it would have sounded more like science fiction. Whereas now we're not there yet. I think there's about a 2-year road till this becomes an application that is actually um, practical in the community. But we just had a call last week with the guide dog community, with the California Association of Guide Dogs. And one of the surprising things on the call is there were 21 people on the call, including their board, 17 of which were blind. And when I get on a call and somebody tells me, is that the dog behind you? I'm like, most of the people can't see the dog. So I found myself describing the dog to a blind community, and the response we got, the acceptance and the anticipation, if you will.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
we got a guy in Claremont, California, that is waiting for Koda to come play with his dog and interact together and learn from each other. And we really stressed, it's not a replacement for dog. We're all dog people, I think, on the call as well. It's never going to replace the live animal. It is there to complement it. It is there to sort of learn from it and possibly teach the successor, if you will, and be a sort of transport of overlapping information. So if one dog collects information during its lifespan, the transition into your next dog, if we can cut that time in half or more, it has financial implications, it has use case information. We cut that time, we make everybody's life better, and there's a direct cost also associated with that. Even though we're not looking at that particular community as a revenue generator, we're always thinking about the back of our mind, what is the financial use case that will justify the cost of some of these projects? And we're really thinking of partner with them. They've already invited us to present at their national events in October. So again, pending our launch, that will be a great intersection in time as well. But we're really amazed by how much that community is very interested in seeing what we can do with this technology and integrate it both on the trainer side and also on the user side for some of the challenges that they're facing, especially with uh, the wait list to get a dog, the uptime of up to a year after you have a dog to train it and become comfortable with it and bond with it, if you will. And part of the bonding is emotional. Again, we're not replacing that, but part of the bonding is the cues, the communication back and forth. And we really believe that a use of a coda can help the transition from one animal to the next through, simultaneous sort of training of each other. We can cut those training times in half. Absolutely. And John, if you could expand a little bit about how decentralized computing brings the combination of decentralized computing and AI brings the certain advantages where we can really leverage both ways, really take off with decentralized computing and make it widely available through these devices.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
why
so
computing and what the advantage of that is.
yeah, I mean, you have this device that the idea here is, and I believe we all know this. We're going to allow owners to volunteer the, cycles on their quotas, for individual projects, and allow for, processing time on a coda, maybe when it's recharging and it's in the corner and its owner's asleep or what have you, and for different projects that the owner, is passionate about and things like that. And to have a common set of decentralized computing platforms with this kind of power. And ultimately, if you, through the APIs, can take advantage of what I was talking about, things like ephemeral memory, so if I have a project that I want to use for decentralized AI and I want to have it train, let's say I'm setting up, a federated learning system and I want to have it train so it can report back to something centrally. Think of, if this thing's very successful, and I'm sure it will be. You have thousands of codas out there. You understand the platform. You're distributing the processing, and it's not like I'm not using all of that to all of that information to create the knowledge. I'm at that point reporting the knowledge that was created individually. and that's really important. And it's a great platform for that. So I think it's really going to advance decentralized AI. There's a million applications for doing that, but just having the availability of something like this, where the owners will allow that their Kodas to be available, to different projects, is going to be huge, and we're going to learn a lot too, just how these things keep up and are used, and just for the data that we can understand of how they're performing and things like that.
We're all have a little bit of expertise in each other's thing, but I'm going to defer to you on why IPFS. What's the advantage of using IPFS versus any other platform to communicate?
I think in this particular instance, the data locality is one thing that really just comes to mind for me. Like aside from kind of the side effects of data locality being on device and having a network communication architecture that is really centered around that idea of individual ownership of data. There's also the cryptographic verification on request also give some assurances from Darnell's point of view and those questions that we were talking about earlier. But for you, from a central architectural standpoint, and the alignment with the use case of what you're trying to do and the values that you're imbuing into the technology that you're creating with Koda, I think that data locality for me is number one. The dogs can talk to each other and communicate in a way that is owner-centric. Yes. And device-centric, where the owner has control over what those interactions are, how much they participate in, say, a shared and cooperative computing infrastructure. Let's say there's a community of people that are orienting their devices around a shared problem. That's something that they can do with IPFS without needing centralized control. Stephen brought up the challenges of where does your data warehoused, and how that really, when it's not warehoused on a third-party server, that lends you benefits that are really difficult to articulate given kind of today's blinders on and how businesses build their data infrastructure. But when your data locality is centered around the device itself and doesn't by default leave even the physical premises without some user interaction or participation, and when it does, those don't go through a third party first, that architecture lends you some strengths and robustness going forward, both from a security and privacy standpoint, but also from a regulatory standpoint. I think you start to, from your architecture from the ground up, assumes maybe defensive posture is maybe not the right way to characterize it, but a owner-centric or individual-centric posture with regards to propagation of data. One of the things that I think is exciting here is I feel like there's been a failure of imagination when it comes to room scale computing, with ambient awareness computing, and we've seen these devices that are actually, even from a user experience and feature and capability standpoint, really oriented towards a very narrow both neurotypicality and physiotypicality from a consumer standpoint. And this is one of the things that I think is exciting about Koda, is that it really does kind of break out of that mold, whereas a lot of the big providers of these technologies right now have gone for the broadest possible use case, broadest common denominator, and the lowest possible cost, trading that free SaaS model at the consumer hardware level. Here you have not only a company that breaks that model from a hardware standpoint, changing the ambient computing and awareness vector a bit, addressing narrower use cases, and also with a privacy orientation, and kind of looking at a new model for how people pay and access their own personal information. We're working with another partner who's using IPFS for a privacy-oriented home security camera, and one of the most exciting, like it's a Me Too product in so many ways. It's a $50 cheap home surveillance camera, but how the data is handled is really what makes the ultimate differentiator, because this device lives in your home with your family. And right now there's 10,000 of those products, but you don't control that technology. And with something like Koda and the architecture that you've described so far, that one change, that one flip in the model makes all the difference from a trust standpoint, from something I'm willing to have in my home.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I think being aware of certainly being aware of the entropy, that's surrounding something you just said that you reminded me of this. Last year, I was doing a ton of research on developing a true random number generator on a cell phone, and ultimately we did it, and we filed the IP for it. But something we learned in analyzing all the entropy around us and devices, changes in, magnetic interference, electromagnetic generation, just, jitter that happens on these chips, like everything. And, we're going to have a device in people's homes, like you said. And one, obviously we'll take advantage for Koda to learn and to understand its environment. But, to Darnell's point, when he first started talking about this, we got to make sure that we protect that data. Think about, the early Wi-Fi imagery that was created, and that was what, almost 20 years ago. If you have a device, you're gonna get a lot of information, and making sure that's protected in a way that, I can, through IPFS, figure out that because of the way I'm processing, my piece of data, I know I'm living on a Koda for that moment in time, and then taking advantage of that's going to be really important. So I think, we acknowledge we got to be aware of that stuff, and we have to, be sensible about how we handle that data, because, we want to be that one device that's kind of like, it has a lot of Me Too stuff, but it's the one that gets it. It's the one that, cares about its owners and looks out for its owners.
Precisely.
I love that cooperative computing aspect of it. And I think that's one of the really unique value propositions that it has. I also like, John's point about building kind of trust and awareness by bringing the dog into public places is one thing that we've done some work on. I did some work in a prior life at Mozilla around ethical IoT design patterns and things like that. How do you build trust in devices that exist in your home? What are the visual and interaction indicators that whether something is recording or not recording, for example, is a really common one. And a lot of devices you just don't know. And one of the things that we've learned from the devices that do live in our home is that almost every single one of them have later been found out maliciously or accidentally to actually be listening when they said they weren't. And I think that the work and the attention that you're paying to the things like gate to cross the uncanny valley from a physical interaction standpoint, I think there's an opportunity here to figure out how to cross the data and trust uncanny valley. What are the visual interactions that the dog and the device are emitting that build that trust with you in a physical space with it? So instead of the Boston Dynamics fear that you have when you see those devices move, you have a sense of comfort and trust. And I think that's going to be one of the things that are going to really be really important for larger consumer adoption.